have Olivier Crépin-Leblond, the former chair of the ALAC, the AtLarge Advisory Committee, from December 2010 to October 2014. So, Olivier, what was AtLarge community like when you just assumed the chair position?
Well, I was quite lucky, actually, when I started being chair in Cartagena in Colombia, because prior to me being chair, there was Ariel Liang, and she had actually managed to put together a group of people that was very active and was very motivated to do things and to bring forward the view of the end users in the ICANN processes. So when I took over, I already had a functioning organization to start with. My sole contribution really was to start looking at how to scale it up and how to also get the other parts of the community in ICANN to know that we were here and we were not the nosy neighbor next door that was going to cause problems for everyone, but we were ready to work with everyone else to make a better ICANN and to actually serve the interests of end users, whilst at the same time also making ICANN grow.
Can you elaborate a little bit more about how you scaled up the AtLarge community?
So initially, as you know, the AtLarge you've got the 15-member AtLarge Advisory Committee, and then you've got the regional AtLarge organizations that we've got 5 of these. And there was a disconnect, if you want, between the ALAC itself and the regional AtLarge organizations, in that there was no location where everyone could work together. So one of the ways to scale up AtLarge was to create working groups so as to be able to have thematic work taking place. And we also had to recognize that some of our members were more interested in ICANN policy and purely working on ICANN policy, whilst others were interested in growing the organization and doing a lot of work on outreach. So our first working groups were about policy processes, one of them being the generic top-level domain process that was extremely important when I started. That was just about to be launched officially by the board, and so we had a working group set up for that. We also had working groups on outreach and engagement, and they also started their work at around the same time. The third thing that we also did was to start industrializing our policy recommendation work. Instead of having ad hoc emails being sent to our mailing list and saying, well, are we interested in contributing in this piece of policy advice? Are we interested in responding to this public comment? We actually had a table set up, and we made extensive use of wikis in order to be able to have that information available and in a format that was understandable by everyone. So that's the sort of thing when I mean industrialization. We started putting some real points at various parts of our wikis that people could go to, and they could immediately be involved and know what was going on. Information is extremely important in an organization that is bottom-up and that is so diversified as AtLarge is.
Thank you. So, to my understanding, AtLarge represents the interests of end users, and then they actively involve in the policy work in ICANN. Can you explain a little bit more why outreach and engagement is also significant?
It's extremely significant in that, like many of the fora that revolve around internet governance, the majority of people taking part, and this is a historical thing, the majority of people taking part come from developed countries, Western Europe, North America. But the AtLarge community has got our 5 regional AtLarge organizations, and so some parts of the world were not well represented at the table, or at least not as well represented as other parts of ICANN. So our work in outreach and engagement focused specifically in these parts of the world, and even in parts of the world like the European AtLarge organization, the EURALO Europe. Western Europe was very well represented, Eastern Europe was less well represented, and so the focus was put on the Eastern Europe. And it's at around that time that we also worked on an ALS, an AtLarge structure, into every country of the world. We're still far away from having reached that goal, but we are slowly moving and engaging with more and more AtLarge structures in countries that we hadn't previously engaged in. So that was the focus of the work. Outreach is extremely important also when ICANN goes into countries that it has never visited before, because we need to get the buy-in of the local community. The internet is not just a technical network, it's a network that is made up of people. And the big difference between the internet and any other networks before was that the internet was for end users worldwide, and that's what makes the strength of the network. And so an ICANN, without having the input of end users, is an ICANN that would function top-down, that would probably be seen as a little cabal of people running the internet, when in fact it's exactly the opposite. It is an organization that is open and that engages anybody and everybody to be able to take part in ICANN's policy processes. And that's what our work was really focused at.
And congratulations for passing a milestone recently of reaching 200 at-large structures, and that's a major achievement.
Well, the congratulations don't really go to me. I think it's the community itself that's been very responsive to this aim of having an at-large structure in every country in the world. And our members are our own ambassadors into all of the different fora that are taking place, all of their different communities. They're the ones that should be thanked about this, because more often than not, they're the ones who can refer other organizations to come and join the at-large community. And that's really good to see.
Right. And we also know that the AtLarge Summit is a major event for all the at-large structure representatives to come together and meet and discuss policy. And the first summit was held in 2009 in Mexico City, and then the second one was the 2014 in London when you were the ALAC chair. Can you talk a little bit about the origin of the summit and its significance to ICANN?
So a lot of work in ICANN takes place at ICANN meetings. A lot of work also takes place using conference calls. One of the problems with conference calls is that you don't have that personal interaction with other people. And so being able to get people to interact with each other face-to-face was something seen as being vital to creating a community. You can't just create a virtual community. It's not a community as such. So the first summit managed to get nearly, I think it was close to 100 at-large structures to come together, many of which had joined but didn't quite know what ICANN was about, weren't quite aware of what to do. And when it came down to meeting face-to-face in Mexico City and discussing various topics which they had decided to discuss, many people suddenly saw the light, as one could say, and said, wow, now I know what this is about. Now I've experienced the ICANN meeting. It's a little bit like talking about cycling and also cycling itself. If you use a cycle, it's totally different than actually just being given a manual on how to use a cycle. And it was the same thing also with the ICANN meetings and with the at-large community. They did a number of well, they had quite a few meetings in Mexico. They all managed to get something out of it. And we had some of our best elements in the next years that had met for the first time at the meeting in Mexico, and that then became very involved. Afterwards, 5 years later, the second summit, I think it's about roughly 5 years later, the second summit in London was a little bit different because we had also a lot of new at-large structures, but there was also this core set of people that had already been to the first at-large summit. And those people managed to pull things forward and ended up with a statement that had a large number of recommendations, some of which had been discussed in conference calls beforehand, but never with everyone involved. When you meet face-to-face is the only time when you can actually have everybody in the room at the same time. I remind you, the Earth is a round thing, and unfortunately we can't do anything about it. If you have a virtual meeting, you're going to have time zones. It will be the middle of the night for some people, it will be the middle of the working day for others, and we'll end up with a problem that there'll only be a subset of people involved in the meeting. At a face-to-face meeting, we're able to get everyone involved. We managed to tap all of their input. We managed to put together a statement with all of these recommendations. And then, since that summit, we have been going on about implementing these recommendations because we knew this had the buy-in from our community.
Thank you very much, Olivier, for your time and your valuable insight. Thank you.
Thank you.